US President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have held a new round of talks that underline just how closely Washington and Jerusalem are now coordinating their moves across the Middle East, even as points of tension begin to emerge. According to the Israeli Prime Minister's office, the two leaders spoke by phone and used the call to discuss Israel's ongoing campaign to dismantle Hamas's remaining military capabilities in Gaza and the broader goal of demilitarizing the Strip. They also reviewed efforts to expand regional normalization, building on earlier accords with Arab states and on Trump's wider push for a reconfigured security architecture in the region. At the end of the conversation, Netanyahu received what his office described as another formal invitation to visit the White House in the near future. If the trip goes ahead, it will be his fifth visit to the White House since Trump began his current term as the 47th President of the United States earlier this year, an unusually high frequency that Israeli officials point to as proof of an exceptionally close working relationship. Yet the timing of the call is as significant as its content. It came just hours after Trump used his social media platform to publicly warn Israel against actions that could destabilize Syria's new leadership. The warning followed reports of clashes between Israeli forces and gunmen in southern Syria, close to the frontier, and was widely interpreted as a signal that Washington expects Jerusalem to factor Syria's fragile transition into its operational planning. In that message, the president chose unusually careful language. Donald Trump wrote, "It is very important that Israel maintain a strong and true dialogue with Syria and that nothing takes place that will interfere with Syria's evolution into a prosperous state." Trump has repeatedly praised Syria's new president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, a former rebel commander who took power after the fall of Bashar al-Assad and recently made a historic visit to the White House, US. Officials see al-Sharaa as central to the effort to stabilize Syria after more than a decade of war, even as analysts warn that Washington is taking a significant gamble on a leader with a hardline past. Within Israel's political system, Trump's latest invitation to Netanyahu is being read through two lenses at once. On one hand, it underscores the depth of the personal and strategic bond between the two leaders at a time when Israel still faces threats from Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and other armed groups. On the other, it comes just days after Netanyahu formally asked Israel's President Isaac Herzog for an extraordinary presidential pardon in his long-running corruption trial, an appeal Trump has publicly supported and urged Israel to grant. The White House has not commented on whether Netanyahu's legal troubles were discussed in the call, and the Israeli statement was silent on the issue. But the political backdrop is impossible to ignore. Netanyahu is trying to steer Israel through regional conflict and diplomatic upheaval while simultaneously fighting to end a trial that could still force him from the stage. A former chief of staff to Netanyahu, speaking as a political analyst, described the current state of relations between Washington and Jerusalem as strong and as close as ever. He noted that the sheer number of visits to the White House in the first year of Trump's second presidency is unprecedented for any foreign head of government, and argued that it reflects a sense in both capitals that their strategic fortunes are now tightly linked. At the same time, he acknowledged that the two governments are sometimes looking at the same map through different lenses. Israeli officials tend to view every development in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon or Syria through the prism of immediate threats after the 7th of October 2023 attacks and the subsequent war with Hamas. Trump, by contrast, is focused on a broader regional deal that includes a fragile ceasefire in Gaza, normalization with Saudi Arabia, a reset with Syria, and a framework that puts Palestinian statehood back on the diplomatic agenda, at least in principle. From the Israeli perspective, those goals do not necessarily clash. Israel also wants stable relations with Arab states and a quieter region. But the question is sequence and pressure. How far will Washington expect Israel to go on issues like Gaza governance or concessions toward the Palestinians, and how quickly, while rockets, raids, and cross-border incidents are still a reality? The analysts stressed that Israel will not compromise on core security needs, whether in Gaza or along the northern and eastern borders. But he also noted that working with what he called the superpower of the world inevitably involves compromises trade-offs and public messaging that may at times sound more flexible than domestic opinion in Israel truly is. In his view, some of Trump's recent references to Palestinian statehood amount to signaling to Arab partners that the idea has not been completely abandoned, even as Israeli leaders insist that the country is in no position to take major steps toward that goal when most of its citizens oppose such moves. While the diplomatic maneuvering continues, developments on the ground in and around Gaza remain grim and complex. Israel is preparing for the possible transfer of additional remains from the Gaza Strip via the Red Cross. These remains are being sent to Israel's National Center of Forensic Medicine for examination, as authorities work to determine whether they belong to some of the hostages killed during the October 7 attacks and subsequent fighting. Officials say the Captives and Missing Persons Directorate is in constant contact with the families of the last 2 known fallen hostages still believed to be in Gaza. For those families, every announcement from forensic experts is a moment of excruciating tension. In a recent case, Israeli authorities confirmed that findings brought from Gaza did not belong to any of the missing hostages, news that brought no joy, only the continuation of uncertainty. At the same time, the Israeli military says it has continued targeted operations against armed groups inside the Strip, even under the terms of a fragile ceasefire. The army reported that it had eliminated a senior commander in Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Allah Alin Abdel Nas Hassan Kudari, described as a Nukba commander involved in the October 7 attack on Kibbutz Nahal Oz and later operations against Israeli troops and civilians. According to the military, the strike was part of a broader wave of attacks on Hamas and Islamic Jihad operatives and commanders designed to disrupt their remaining operational capacity across Gaza. Violence also persists in the West Bank. 2 young Israelis were lightly wounded in a suspected stabbing attack near the Jewish community of Asherot, just north of Jerusalem. Security forces shot and killed the assailant at the scene. In a separate incident near Hebron, troops opened fire on a driver who, according to the army, carried out a car ramming at the Utkim junction near Kiryat Arba, injuring a soldier and then attempting to hit another military unit. The driver was killed by soldiers from the paratroopers brigade. These incidents reinforce the sense that even when a ceasefire technically holds in Gaza, the wider Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains active on multiple fronts. Amid this backdrop, a very different kind of message is being delivered from Beirut. Pope Leo XIV, the first US-born pope and the head of the Catholic Church, has used a historic visit to Lebanon to urge its fractured communities and, by extension, the wider region to step back from the path of violence and sectarian hatred. Speaking at Martyrs Square in central Beirut, just a short distance from neighborhoods scarred by clashes between Israel and Hezbollah, Leo addressed tens of thousands of people gathered for an interfaith event. Pope Leo said, "Peace is still possible and must be pursued." He framed Lebanon as a symbol of both the dangers and possibilities of coexistence, telling the crowd that in an age when coexistence can seem like a distant dream, a society where Christians, Muslims, and others live side by side shows that fear, distrust, and prejudice do not have to define the future. The pontiff met Christian, Sunni, Shia, and Druze leaders, calling them builders of peace, and encouraged them to resist pressure from armed groups and regional powers that seek to turn Lebanon into a permanent proxy battlefield. His visit comes as the country continues to struggle with economic collapse, political paralysis, and the shockwaves from the Gaza war and border tensions. While religious leaders speak of reconciliation, political realities in Israel's most important alliance are undergoing a historic shift. Public opinion in the United States on Israel has changed more in the past 2 years than in many previous decades combined, and much of that movement is occurring among younger Americans and among groups that have traditionally been strongly pro-Israel. Recent polling shows that a growing share of Republican voters under 50 now view Israel unfavorably, even as older Republicans maintain significantly more supportive views. Among evangelicals, a community long seen as Israel's most reliable base of support in the US, backing remains strong overall. But surveys indicate that support among younger evangelical Christians has dropped sharply in just a few years. Another national poll conducted in late August found that around half of registered US voters believe Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, while roughly a third disagree and the rest are unsure. Among younger voters and Democrats, the share who use the term genocide is notably higher. Among older voters and many Republicans, the opposite is true. The result is a deep generational and partisan divide over how Americans see Israel's conduct in the Gaza war and, by extension, over whether Washington should continue providing large-scale military support. Analysts point to several factors behind this change: the power of social media imagery from conflict zones, the way many younger Americans now frame global events as struggles between the powerful and the oppressed, and a growing skepticism toward foreign interventions of all kinds. Often, these debates unfold without much historical or regional context, but their political impact is real. They are beginning to shape congressional debates over aid packages and could influence US policy for years to come. Still, the base of support has not disappeared. A large majority of evangelicals continue to say they see a biblical or historic connection to Israel's claim to the land, and many remain deeply engaged with Israeli causes. For Israeli leaders, the challenge is to navigate a United States where the alliance at the governmental level is still strong, but the underlying public consensus is weakening and fragmenting. One vivid example of that ongoing support is playing out this week in Jerusalem, where the largest ever delegation of Christian pastors and influencers from the United States has arrived for an intensive program organized in cooperation with Israeli institutions. Approximately 1,000 church leaders and media figures are taking part. Their goal is not just to tour holy sites, but to be trained as ambassadors for Israel in what organizers describe as an ideological war over public opinion in the West. The leader of the initiative, evangelical author and activist Dr. Mike Evans, argues that enormous sums of money from Gulf states and others are flowing into Western universities, media and social networks in an effort to shape how young people view Israel and the broader Middle East. Dr. Mike Evans said, It's all intentional to poison the minds of the young people of America, and our objective is to use the pulpit, and the pulpit will speak louder than the propaganda. The delegation's schedule is tightly choreographed. Participants are visiting the site of the Nova Music Festival massacre to meet families of hostages and victims, holding solidarity events with relatives of the abducted, and traveling to Jerusalem's military cemetery on Mount Herzl to lay flowers on the graves of soldiers killed since October 7. They are also due to visit the Western Wall, where, in a symbolic gesture, they will place slips of paper bearing the names of those killed into the stones and pray for their families. Evans says many of the pastors present own or operate television channels, radio stations, and large churches across the United States, giving them significant reach. He stresses that a substantial number are closely connected to Trump's faith advisory circles and see their mission as both religious and political, defending Israel's legitimacy and countering messages from commentators, including prominent conservative voices, who have recently questioned whether Israel should still be considered a key US ally. Looking ahead, Evans argues that Israel cannot fight this ideological battle alone. He notes that Israelis constitute only a tiny fraction of the world's population and insists that pro-Israel Christians must play a larger role online and in public debate to counter what he sees as targeted disinformation. In his words, Dr. Mike Evans said, "Listen, these 10,000 pastors not coming here for a tour. They're coming here to be ambassadors, to partner with the State of Israel, to fight the lies against the nation of Israel. As these battles over perception continue, Israeli officials are also investing heavily in hard security." Israel's already dense air defense network built around the Iron Dome, David's sling and arrow systems, is now being bolstered by a new technology that could fundamentally change the economics of air defense. The new Iron Beam system, a high-energy laser developed by Rafael Advanced Defense Systems in partnership with Elbit Systems, has completed key stages of operational testing and is expected to be deployed for the first time by the Israeli military in the near term. Unlike conventional missile interceptors, each of which can cost tens of thousands of dollars, Iron Beam uses concentrated laser energy to destroy rockets, drones, mortar shells, and possibly even some ballistic threats in flight at a fraction of that cost. The system is designed to complement existing defenses. Iron Dome will continue intercepting many short-range rockets and mortars. David Sling will handle medium-range missiles within the atmosphere, and Arrow will target long-range and high-altitude threats. Iron Beam would then add a rapid-fire layer capable of dealing with dense barrages of inexpensive projectiles like drones and mortar rounds, where the traditional cost-exchange ratio has increasingly favored attackers. Israeli officials say the plan is to station Iron Beam batteries at multiple locations across the country, including near population centers and strategic facilities. If it performs as expected under combat conditions, Israel would become the first country in the world to field a fully operational, high-powered laser air defense system, potentially setting a precedent other states will seek to follow. Far from the battlefields of Gaza and the test ranges of southern Israel, the political fallout of the war is also being felt in European capitals. In Dublin, a local debate over the name of a small city park has become a national and international story, highlighting the tensions between solidarity with Palestinians and concerns about anti-Semitism. The park in question is named after Chaim Herzog, Israel's sixth president, who was born in Belfast and raised in Dublin, and whose father served as Ireland's first chief rabbi. Some local politicians propose renaming it Free Palestine Park as a gesture of support for Palestinians in light of the war in Gaza and Ireland's vocal criticism of Israeli policy. Supporters of the change argued that continuing to honour a former Israeli president in this way sends the wrong message at a time when images of destruction from Gaza dominate international headlines. Opponents, including Ireland's Prime Minister and senior ministers, as well as members of the small Irish Jewish community, warned that the move would be seen as erasing Irish Jewish history and punishing a community that has no role in current Israeli decisions. After intense public and political pressure, the Dublin City Council decided to delay and then effectively halt the renaming effort, citing procedural issues and the lack of clear regulations for renaming public sites. Israel's current president, Isaac Herzog, the son of Chaim Herzog, called the proposal shameful and disgraceful and said it would harm the historic connection between the Irish and Jewish peoples. Jewish leaders in Ireland described the withdrawal of the plan as a relief, but also a wake-up call about how quickly symbolic actions can inflame old prejudices. The episode encapsulates the dilemmas facing many Western societies: how to express solidarity with Palestinians and criticize Israeli policy without targeting Jewish communities at home or rewriting shared history. As the day's news cycle draws to a close, Israel itself is bracing for more uncertainty. Meteorologists forecast cloudy skies for much of the country tonight, with cool temperatures and clearer, milder conditions tomorrow. But in politics and security, the outlook is far less predictable. Trump's invitation to Netanyahu sets the stage for another high-stakes encounter in Washington that could shape the future of Gaza, the trajectory of Israel's relations with Syria and its neighbors, and even the personal fate of Israel's longest-serving prime minister. On the streets of Beirut, Pope Leo's call for peace competes with the echoes of recent clashes in American churches and on social media feeds. An ideological struggle over narratives of Israel and Palestine grows more intense. For now, the formal alliance between the United States and Israel remains strong. Military cooperation is deep, intelligence sharing is constant, and top-level dialogue is frequent. But beneath that surface, public attitudes, regional realities, and political pressures are shifting rapidly. How leaders respond in Washington, Jerusalem, Ramallah, Beirut, Dublin, and beyond will determine whether the coming years bring a more stable order or whether this moment proves to be just one more pause in a conflict that keeps finding new ways to reignite.